Hello YouTube and welcome back to Tylo or Bust. I'm Mike Braedley and we're gonna get right into it. Kind of switch here over to our science probe that we left in orbit last time, and let's get going. So obviously this is post-commentary because all of this video is fast forward. So let's talk about what this science probe is going to be doing for us. And a little bit of a recap on last episode. So I got this guy into orbit here last episode, and I crashed his transfer stage down into Tylo. There's actually one little bit left that you'll see later on in the episode. But yeah, I'm just trying to gauge how much delta V I'm going to need in order to land a sizable landing craft. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take measurements on the orbital velocity that I need in order to, as well as calculate how much velocity I'll be getting from basically dropping out of orbit. And that will give me a rough estimate of how much delta V my rocket needs. So yeah, just changing orbital altitude here. I do a number of orbits and at various altitudes, and in fact I made a graph of that, and so there's a graph. So as you can see, the orbital velocity drops with the altitude, which is normal. That's actually, if that didn't happen, some very weird stuff would be going on with physics. So yeah, but it drops fairly linearly in this low altitude, which is pretty good because it means it's very easy to predict what your orbital velocity will be at in a circular orbit at a given altitude. As you can also see, the velocity contribution from our altitude, our vertical velocity, increases with our altitude, and that's because basically you have zero vertical velocity when in orbit, but if you kill all your orbital velocity, you're just dropping straight down. And the rough estimate is to just add these two numbers together, and you get a idea of what your orbital, or what your final velocity will have to be that you need to kill. So the orange delta V required. As you can see, that goes up with altitude, and that's basically all because of the vertical velocity from your potential energy. So what I'm going to be doing is I'll be dropping my lander down to about a 10 kilometer orbit when I actually do go to land, and there I'll have more orbital velocity to kill, but I won't be gaining as much velocity from falling down to Tylo. And yeah, that's basically the plan. So as we can see here, where are we in the video? We're not all that far. Yeah, so it's hard to tell right now what altitude I'm at. If I just take a quick look. So it looks like I'm about to do the 60 or even drop down. Yeah, so I'm circularizing around the 60 right here or so. I started at 40, did a 50 kilometer orbit, then a 60 kilometer orbit, and then I start dropping down to the lower orbits. And it's all just to get a nice gauge on how much velocity it's going to, or how much delta V I need to get in my lander. With that, let's talk a little more about if all this calculation is reasonable. So, the wiki states that the escape velocity for Tylo is about 3.5 kilometers per second. And actually, I'll bring up the exact value. It from the wiki it says it is... Okay, maybe not 3.5. It's 3.068 kilometers per second is the escape velocity. And that agrees fairly well with what I have in the graph. As you can see, the total delta V required is going up from about 2.5 kilometers, approaching 3 kilometers. Basically, the escape velocity is the velocity you would need from an impulse at the surface to get you an infinite distance away from the body that you're orbiting. And so it would take 3 kilometers per second to get me infinitely away from Tylo, if Tylo were just sitting in a complete void of any other gravitational source like Jool or the Sun. So if my calculations had said more than 3,000, I would know I had done something wrong. So luckily, it doesn't look like that's the case. All my calculations seem to be agreeing with reality. So I'm going to need about 2,400 kilometers per second, 2,400 meters per second of delta V in order to land. And then I need about the same amount to take off again, which tells me I should probably have around 6 kilometers per second of delta V total or more in my lander if I want to ensure that I'm going to have enough to get down to the surface and then back up. And in fact, as we'll later on, we'll see that my lander actually has closer to 8 kilometers per second, which is probably a good idea because the 2,400 meters per second is just an ideal case. You're going to be doing steering losses, and you're going to have inefficient landing burns and all these other things that will eat up your delta V budget. So basically I'm counting on 8 kilometers per second will be hopefully enough to get me down to the surface and then back up. But of course we're going to have to wait a little longer in order to see if that's the case. Anyways, we're coming up on some of my lower orbits. Right now we are approaching... Oh, this is too slow. We're approaching the 27.5 kilometer orbit. And that second burn should be, or to circularize that orbit should be happening right about now. And there we go, we're at 27.5 kilometers. After this, you can't warp faster, or you can't use non-physical time warp below 30 kilometers around Tylo. So here I set up a Kerbal alarm to just get me through that without having to use physical time warp. It goes much faster when it's 100 times than versus 4 times. And this gets me down to, that was probably the 15 kilometer burn. We circularize at 15 kilometers. Oh no, sorry, this has to be up higher, 25 kilometers. Yeah, my preview window doesn't allow me to really see any of the values that MechJeb has spit out, so I have to basically create a screenshot and read it off that. But anyways, down to time warp again using Kerbal alarm system. Circularize my orbit, take the reading. And then, or continue circularizing. And then bring my orbit down again. Set an alarm. Time warp. And come back. So yeah, this is the long and tedious process, which is why it's all fast forward and not live commentary, because otherwise it'd be close to an hour of me just doing all this tedious work. And then we see the remains of, or well, briefly, the remains of our transfer stage from last episode. That's the only part that survived, but it allows me to quickly warp for some of these lower altitude orbits. Set another alarm. Do another quick warp. And another burn. This, I think, it's down to 15 kilometers. And we'll burn again to get us down to 10 kilometers. There's a burn for 10 kilometers. Or at least the first burn. Another alarm, another time warp. And another burn to circularize. And a burn down to 5 kilometers. Time warp. Right there. And why didn't we switch? Why are we still on this guy? Why can't we switch? Oh, that's why. My probe was destroyed. So 5 kilometers is about the limit for any safe orbits. Below that, you risk running into hills, which is apparently what my probe did. So yeah, that there ends the experiment of orbital velocities. So with that, let us try and go build a lander which will have enough delta V to actually land. And of course this is all fast forwarded here as well. We're only going to send down 2 Kerbals down to the surface Tylo. And this first build is just to check the viability of our lander. I decided here to go with 4 arrow spikes on the main reascent stage or what have you. I'll have an additional 16 arrow spikes on for more outside tanks. So yeah, there are my 20 engines that will get me down to the surface, hopefully. And a few more tanks just to make sure I have enough delta V. Now there is something that I forgot to do here, other than the fuel lines, which is again important so that I can drop those outside tanks off when they're empty. The first little bit of delta V stats, and as you can see from that window, this should be good. We have a total of 8,600 meters per second. But yeah, just putting the ladders on here so that the guys can walk down. I think I already have nope, there are the landing struts that I'm going to need. And some launch supports just for testing. Everything looks good. Let's go ahead. Oh, extra fuel, which is all feeding into the center stage. I think that actually ups my total delta V by a little bit. I didn't even notice that. That actually reduces my total delta V. It's probably because I'm going to have less thrust in that last stage. But in any case, it's still more than enough. Let's get rid of the crew because all I want to do is test. And this is just to see if the thing will land. Lower the gear. Release the clamps. And the thing falls apart. So the thing that I forgot, struts. I'm going to need a lot more structural support in order to keep this guy together. Now we don't need a whole lot, just enough to keep everything together. And here I'm just checking to see if everything's all properly lined up. If you don't get it all nice and symmetrical, there's a tendency for your craft to rotate. Things don't look quite square to me, but that's okay. It's probably good enough. Add more struts on the bottom, and then strut the outside tanks together. And let's see if that's going to do it for us. So again, move the launch clamps to the first stage, lower the gear, release the clamps, and she's fine. So that's our first test done. And she flies. unfortunately, it is rather difficult to control, and as such, I do a controlled flight into ground. So let's give that another go. Thrust up, launch, and here things are going at least a little better from the start. I do have MechJeb keeping me from overheating my engines. Oh, what happened? Okay, so I've got a little bit of a problem with those outside tanks, and just getting MechJeb here to land me. Another test, see if that can take off. Get MechJeb to land us again, and it does. So it's time for a photo op. There we have Jeb. At least I think that was Jeb. And Bob. At least I think that's Bob. Let's get the sun out so we get a nice picture. And photo time. Okay, so we don't need this ship out here near the launch complex, so we're just gonna get our 2 Kerbonauts back inside and recover the vessel. So anyways, let's go ahead and build our launch stage for this guy. We're going to need a lot of thrust to even get this guy into orbit. He weighs a lot. They're using subassembly loader just to so I don't have to build it again by hand. And another time using subassembly loader to get my transfer stage. And yeah, those 4 engines are not going to be enough. So let's put on 8. So that'll be our transfer stage to get that guy out to Jool and into orbit of Tylo, and probably also to drop him down to the 10-kilometer orbit when the time comes. And now we just need to build the launch stage below him. There's our orbital insertion stage, and then our main lifting stage is going on right now. Yeah, those engines don't belong in that first stage. So some initial staging here to make sure MechJeb's going to tell me the right values when I go looking for thrust to weight ratio off the launch pad and any delta V stats I might want to get. And I realized that, no, I don't really want this engine to overheat, so I'm going to add that little extra tiny Rockamax, or, well, not tiny, but small volume Rockamax tank to the bottom. That does help with the overheating issue of the mainsail. And then those struts just to make sure everything stays together when we launch. We don't want these things shaken apart. Well, I say that now. Having post-commentary gives me 20/20 vision, so I know exactly what happens, and well, it's nothing good. So getting our extra booster stages on. There's of course asparagus staging. So we're going to do 3 sets of these. Again, doing some staging to make sure that, or to make it easier later. And my delta V stats, which tell me that I will be able to make it into orbit. My atmospheric delta V from the entire thing is over 7.5 kilometers, which should be more than enough to get anything into orbit. The question, though, is, will my launch stage handle all of this? So, some final tidying up here, double check on my delta V stats, and everything is looking good. So, we are about to name this guy after I do some final stage setup there. Make sure all those external tanks drop off in the right order. Everything's good. Let's go launch. So we're on the launch pad and waiting for it to load. Still waiting for physics to load. Still waiting for physics to load. And we fall apart. So something's obviously not strong enough. We totally destroy everything essentially except for a couple of the big orange tanks on the bottom. Yeah, it's pretty horrendous. Yeah, you can see some of the frame lag that I'm getting from this explosion. It was a fairly massive ship and a fairly massive explosion too. Let's see if we can fix that. Revert back to the VAB. So, more struts. That always solves the problem, right? So yeah, just trying to figure out a way to secure my transfer stage to the lander, or vice versa, And I'm hoping that it's just a handful of struts that I'm going to need. Still need to figure out the best placement. Right here I'm thinking inline with these external tanks are probably a good idea. Oh yeah, and here I decided that looking at the delta V table earlier, some of my velocities were a little low, so just adding a little extra punch to my launch stage. And these are actually staged in an interesting manner, but that doesn't really matter for here right now. We'll talk about that when I actually do launch this guy. But yeah, I think we're ready there. Just the final check on the staging. There we go, we're all set. Let's save and launch. Again, physics is slow to load. Still slow to load. Still very slow to load. And we collapse again. In super slow mode. No, this is actually at real time. I didn't slow down the video. Stuff is still exploding. So yeah, let's just see if that transfer stage can support the whole thing. We'll save that lifter stage for later use, if we ever want to. Add some more supports. Rename the guy so that we don't overwrite our previous save. Get rid of the crew. And... yeah, no. Stuff don't work! It's broken! Well, everyone knows the solution for this. It's to add more struts. So let's go back to the VAB. And add even more struts. That has to be the solution, right? Must be the solution. Well, no. It's not the solution. Well guys, I have a nice lander, I just can't get it into space. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.